Yo, what's up to everybody out there? Welcome to another edition of the Roundtable Talk, and I am your host, C Money. And in today's episode, I'm doing my very first movie review, and I'm quite sure there will be several other movie reviews that will probably result in checking out our movie review section. But for right now, we're gonna do our first movie review, and of course, y'all probably already know what it is. But I'm going to say, even though I am late in the game, I'm about a month late in the game, but I recently just saw it, and I'm going to tell you why, and we're going to do a movie review. I'm going to tell you first what we're doing and why I'm doing it so late. We're going to do a movie review on the Michael movie starring Jafar Jackson, which is Michael Jackson's nephew. Now, one of the reasons why I was late seeing this movie, I seen it I think about a week or two ago. About 2 weeks ago. I've seen the movie, and one of the reasons why I don't like seeing the movie when it first come out, as you already know, the weekend premiere of a movie always be packed with a lot of people. Sometimes, now that they have these assigned seatings to where, which I kind of like the fact that they do have assigned seating, because normally you'll go buy tickets or you'll try to buy tickets and then you get to the movie theater and the movie theater be full and they be overpacked with people and there's no more seats. So now movie theaters have gotten smarter to where, okay, let's start doing assigned seating, and then when all the seats get filled up, boop, you either going to sit right here and your friend or girlfriend or wife or whoever you came with going to be sitting over there, or you just gonna have to wait till two seats come available. Either y'all gonna get split up and stuff. So it kind of is like that. And premiere weekend for any movie, it's always packed. And then most people say, I'm not gonna go on the first week, so I'm gonna go on the second week. And then sometimes the second week can be a little bit kind of, thing too. And then not only that, you have less noise. There's always somebody in the movie theater, and they tell you this right before the movie starts: silence your phones. And always somebody. I took my mom, and then my mom, she has an old school flip phone, and I didn't silence her phone. So basically, even though her phone didn't go off, thank God, but there's always that one person in the movie theater that doesn't silence their phone, or so, or you got somebody that doing like bits and pieces. They're recording a little bit of the movie theater so they can post it on their, you know, storyline on one of their social medias and things like that. Or you have somebody that they be sitting there, with they phone in their hand and the light be on the phone. Because when you go in the movie theater, you not only are you supposed to silence your phone, you're also supposed to dim the light on your phone so it won't be as bright. So everybody be like, where that light at? And, because your thing probably be on. And then you always get somebody who talking through the movie and you can hear them, or they laugh. And, of course, with Michael Jackson, I've seen several social media posts that people were singing along through all the songs when they was playing them in the movie. Okay, let me say this. I'm not going to do a spoiler alert. If you haven't seen it, don't watch this video. If you haven't seen the Michael Jackson movie or you planning on going to see it, don't watch this video, because there's several points that I might point out in the movie theater and I don't want to spoil it for a lot of people. And I've been seeing a lot of comments and a lot of things about the movie, and I say, let me go see it for myself. But one thing that you don't want, I'm not want to do, I don't want to spoil it for somebody. So if you feel like you don't want to, you want to go see the movie and you don't want to hear about my review, don't watch this video. I'm telling you in advance, so don't go in the comments talking about, oh, you spoiling it for me, because I'm not going to tell you what all happens in the movie, or I'm not going to tell you the whole part aspect of the movie. But if you don't want to hear bits and pieces of what I think of the review, don't watch this, because I do not want to hear negative comments in the comment section saying, I was going to see the movie, now you spoiled it for me, and no, I don't want to hear that. So if you don't want me to spoil it for you, even though I'm not trying to give y'all spoiler alerts, but it may come out to where I may say something that may be a part of the movie that you may not like. Don't watch this video. Go see the movie, then come back and watch this video, and then you can give your review as well. If you have a review as well for the Michael Jackson, for the Michael movie, also comment at the bottom of this page. And you can also email me roundtable305@yahoo.com. Alright, let's get into it. I don't want to waste no more time. let's get into the movie. Now, the movie stars Jafar Jackson, Michael Jackson's nephew. And it also stars, one of the greatest female actors of all time, Nia Long. Now, Coleman Dominguez, I've never really heard of him. I know he's a great actor, and I'm not saying that putting away from everybody. But, I only knew Nia Long in the movie. Like a lot of they had a great cast, and a lot of the people that was in the cast, of course, Lorenz Tate, a lot of, great people was in the movie, but a lot of them I really don't know, and a lot of them are like rising stars that are already in other movies and television shows. So I'm not hip to a lot of the modern day TV shows where they got all these new actors and stuff. I'm used to people like Lorenz Tate, Nia Long, who's been acting and who's been in the game since the 80s and 90s. So excuse me, it is what it is. But the movie, if y'all know, the movie is based off of Michael Jackson. Now, the movie is centering out the early years of Michael Jackson from his childhood all the way to basically the Bad era, which is, the album, the last album he did from the 80s. He did 8 albums in the 90s, but Bad was his last album of the 80s, because he did Off the Wall in the late 70s, he did Thriller in the early 80s, and then he did Bad in the late 80s. And the movie actually mainly centers around. Now, one thing I did want to say, and there's been comments about this even before I seen the movie, and I said this: there's something that's missing out of this movie, and there's 2 factors that is missing out of the movie, and most of y'all should already know what those 2 factors is. It is Rebe and Janet Jackson. Now, I've been reading several of these comments and social media posts about this. I believe that, I don't know if it's true, but allegedly, I don't know if it's true or not, but I believe that Janet did not want to be a part of the movie. But even if so, you didn't even reference none of them. You realize that Janet plays a part in it. Now, they did have LaToya Jackson in the movie, which to me made no sense at all, because LaToya wasn't really a success story from the Jacksons. LaToya was like the lowest success person out of it. She did her little thing. She had a song or two or whatever. Because you remember, Michael Jackson, if I rank it, Michael Jackson was the biggest superstar from the Jackson family. Then came Janet Jackson. Then came Rebe Jackson. Then came Jermaine Jackson. And then follows Tito and Marlon and Jermaine and all them. LaToya was the lowest person to become the superstardom out of it. Because if you reach it, Michael Jackson was the most successful story out of all the Jackson siblings. Then came Janet, then came Rebe. Because you all know, nobody is not friends to not go out and don't hear a Centipede at somebody's barbecue. Even in the clubs, when I went to, some certain clubs and they play old school songs, there was always that Rebe Jackson was always in somebody's Centipede. So you can't tell me that. And then Jermaine Jackson, he had his hits and stuff like that, So for me, it was like LaToya wasn't really necessary in the movie. I would have thought you would have had Janet and them. Because, I understand why you didn't put Rebe in the movie, because the movie was basically centered around Michael. And I know that part of Michael's life, he didn't really have a relationship with a lot of his siblings, but he did have a relationship. I know they had to put the Jackson 5 in there because, of course, the movie was centered around his earlier life, and part of his earlier life was with the Jackson 5. Now, I don't know if Michael had a relationship with his sister LaToya, but for me, it was like her involvement in the movie was really not necessary. It was like she was more of a statue figure in the movie, meaning that you'll see her in different episodes, and then she'll probably have that one hit line in certain parts of the movie, but it wasn't like her and Michael Jackson actually had a connection in the movie. We can't honestly say in real life who Michael really had a connection with in his personal life. There was rumors I've seen back in the day. There was speculations that him and LaToya did have a relationship with each other, but we don't know really what happened. We don't really know who Michael had a relationship with. who he was close to out of all of his siblings. Because, there's always that one sibling that always has a relationship, more relationship with another sibling, and don't and have a less relationship with another sibling. Cause trust me, I'm a living testimony of that. And there's always that, because if you have three or four kids, three or four siblings in your family, you're always gonna have a close relationship with one, and close relationship with and less relationship with another. Trust me, you're not gonna have a close relationship with all your siblings. There's always gonna be that one sibling that you cling or that you have a more closer relationship with than the other. So we don't know who. If you kind of have an understanding of who you think it is, just comment. I mean, we all know that we all have that, one sibling that we're more. Even if you have more siblings, if you're the only child, then we all know then that's not possible. But if you have more than one sibling, if you have more than two siblings, because if it's just you and another sibling, and it's only two of y'all, of course you're gonna have that connection because you're the only two. But if you have like three or four more siblings, like I do, I have like, three other siblings with me, and I'm the youngest out of four siblings. You're always gonna have that one sibling that you're more connected to than the other siblings. So we're not gonna say who he was all connected to. We're not gonna say, oh, he was connected to Randy more than he was connected to them. He was connected more to Marlon or to Jermaine or Tito or whatever. We're not gonna say, oh, he was connected to Janet more. So we don't know. So but in the movie, it was like Latoya wasn't really necessary in the movie. I did see a post that Janet was not in the movie. I don't know if that was by choice or was meant for her not to be in the movie, or did they ask her? Because of course, when you're doing a documentary of a film, that's like doing a documentary of the Wayans brothers, or doing a documentary, of the Winans family, or of course, the documentary of the Jackson family. You do have to get a consent from everybody to say, hey, you are part of this legacy family. That's like saying, you're part of the Wayans family. Can we use you in the documentary? So we want to give you, because the Wayne family is a family of actors. The Jackson family is a family of musicians. You got to get these consent from these family members to say, hey, we want to use you and reference you in the movie. Can we get your consent? So we don't. If you do know, comment. Because I often say that Janet should have been one of the main people in the movie. That because she was one of the second biggest success stories out of the Jackson family. Remember, I told you Michael was the first success, then it was Janet, then it became Rebe and Jermaine. Because Rebe and Jermaine was basically in the same neck and neck. Rebe had that one. Rebe had several songs, but we all know Rebe from Centipede. She had other songs. She had Ticket to Love. She had Reaction. She had Plaything. She had a lot of other hit songs. Well, a lot of songs. They may not be hits, but she had a lot of other good songs. And Jermaine Jackson, he had Let's Get Serious, and Why Don't You Do What You Do, and You Do What You Do for Me, and other songs as well. And Marlon came out with a song, and of course, Latoya, I think, did a song or two, but Michael, Janet, Rebe, and Jermaine was one hit wonders. Because you ain't going in a club or you ain't going to a party and you ain't finna hear no Centipede, because Centipede was like just the real deal. But I would thought they would have had Janet in the movie. Now there were several aspects. Now I didn't know, and even though we all knew how Joe Jackson was, but I never knew that Joe Jackson was that rough. Now we all know that there have been several Michael Jackson, there have been several, movies and documentaries. We had the Jackson, the American Dream, which starred Lawrence Hilton Jacobs, and also it starred the great Angela Bassett, and it told the story about the Jacksons and all that, and they've had several documentaries along the line. This Is It, the Michael Jackson movie that right before he passed. They've had some, but this one told a story to like woo, and it made you think that I did, because even my mom was saying this. She was like, Joe Jackson, and I didn't know how much of a impact Joe was. I didn't know what I'm trying to say is, and I'm trying to get the words to say like when I didn't know Joe was that hard on was more harder on Michael than he was with the other siblings, because it never really like when if you watch the movie, and I'm not gonna really spoil it. It was like it was more of Michael was more punished in the move in his life than the other siblings, because it was like the other siblings, they probably did get punished, but it was more focused on Michael's punishment. And it was basically like, wow, you're treating Michael worse than you treating the, even though Michael was the lead of the group, he was the lead singer, but it was like you're treating him worse than you are and he was basically the youngest out of all of the Jackson Five. He's not the youngest of the Jackson siblings, because we all know Janet is the youngest sibling, and Weeby is the oldest sibling, because Weeby, was the oldest. Because that's why they said, if you've ever didn't heard of you ever see Weeby Jackson's interview, I seen one of her interviews that she did on Soul Train, and she said that she had no desire for music, and she started and in the 1980s. She was 35 years old when she came out, and that was in the mid 80s, and she was 35 years old. She got married and she moved away, and she had no desire for music, but then she ended up coming into music, even though she was in the music game, because she was in the Jackson 5 special, the TV show, and she was in several of their performances, but she had no desire for music. And when she got married, she moved away, and she really didn't have desire for music. She was a family woman, was a family wife, but she ended up getting into the music. But you know Michael was the youngest out of all the Jackson Five, and it was more that he was more severely punished than most of the other ones. Now, while watching the movie, I started seeing a lot of things that was happening. I believe the other Jackson 5 members really didn't care for the way Joe was treating Michael, because I always thought, in my opinion, that there was some tension between Michael and the rest of his siblings because of his more of a, he was more out there than the rest of them. Marlon, Tito, Jermaine, and all of them. Like, I felt like it was where he was more in the spotlight than they was, and I always thought it was tension. But as I saw the movie, I started realizing, because there was bits and parts of the movie where you was like, the boys really didn't care for Michael, because Michael was like their youngest brother. And we all been through that notion. If you've ever been the youngest out of a lot of kids, or the youngest out of 3 or 4 kids, you know that. And I've been through this, and I'm not gonna go in full detail. When you're the youngest out of several siblings, you're always that one that get left out of things. You're always the one that get left out of, your brothers and sisters. They gonna hang out with their friends, and you're stuck at home, and you're 9, 10 years old, and your brothers and sisters is 14, 15, 16 years old, teenagers, and they get to go hang out with their friends. And your mom be like, take your brother with you, take your sister with, no. And then they go hang out at the mall, and they hanging out at the mall while you sitting in the corner, and stuff like that. There's been several times where I've seen people that they want to go hang out with their brothers and sisters, but their brothers is like, no. There was an issue, and I've seen this. I was in Orlando, and I visited, my favorite theme park is Fun Spot, and I took me and my actual girl went, and there was this little girl that was there, and her sister was there with her friend, and the little girl wanted to ride one of the roller coasters, and my girl was like, go ride with them, go ride with them. And I'm like, that's a little white girl, I don't want to be riding with somebody else's kid and stuff. And my girl wanted to ride with them, but then I was like, I'm not riding with some stranger and stuff. And the lady, and I guess the lady or the guardian or the mother or whoever it was that was with her was like trying to get somebody to ride with her in the same riding car. And I guess eventually it happened where one somebody else. And I'm like, there are some times where, you'll be like, hey, I'm with my friends. I don't want to, hang with you. You're my little brother. Go play toys or go play, and it kind of got into where it got more into Michael's personal life as a kid, to where he was like basically a loner, and we all knew back then, and we all had that feeling, and I always had that mindset because we had that mindset, and you probably said the same thing. Michael Jackson didn't have a childhood because he was always on the road. He never had friends because he was always, you know, performing, or he was always, doing other things. He was, he didn't have a childhood life because every time he turned around, Joe Jackson had them rehearsing. He didn't have kids where he can go outside and play and stuff like that. So we all realized that Michael Jackson's childhood was taken from him because he didn't have time to play with friends and hang out and stuff. He was always rehearsing and he was always performing. So we got that notion with that. But there was parts of the movies that say we now see why Jackson. It wasn't just that because of his rehearsals and stuff. It was also because of, he didn't have nobody to play with. He was a loner. He was one of them people that, your older brothers are here and you're here. They don't want to play with you because they don't want to do the things you want to do. So you go and you play by yourself, and that's why he ended up eventually getting the, he building that Neverland Ranch, and he had Bubbles, which was his so-called best friend and all that. And I was like, it's a lot of things that we don't see that we assume, because I'm quite sure pretty soon there's going to be a Janet Jackson, story. Because remember when they did an NWA, Straight Outta Compton about NWA, then who came out with a documentary? Micheal, who was one of Dr. Dre's ex-girlfriends. And she came out with a documentary, and then eventually, somebody else is going to come out with a documentary and stuff like that. Look how many Tupac documentaries and Biggie Smalls documentaries came out. We don't know basically what went on behind stuff until you get the truth. And the Michael movie said a lot of things, and I was like, ooh, and even my mom said, like, we didn't know Joe was like that. And Joe was more harder on Michael than any of the other ones. Now, I may be wrong, but that's what I seen out of this movie. Now, along with that, like I said earlier, that Janet and Reby should have been at least part of the movie. Even if they only had one hit liners, they should have been a part of the movie and stuff. And then, come to find out, I didn't know Michael was the first one. Michael wasn't the first one to break away from the group. If you've watched the movie, you know what I'm talking about. Because remember, in the part of the movie, somebody broke away from the group before Michael did, and I'm not gonna spoil it for most of y'all, but if you know, you know. But if you want to say it in the comments, say it in the comments, because I didn't even know Michael was not the first person to break away, because I always thought that, like most people, like New Edition, we all know who the first person to break away from New Edition was, Bobby Brown, and then eventually, after the any heartbreak, everybody started drifting away. Johnny Gill went and did his own solo project. Rob Chesvin went and did his own solo project. BVD went and did their own thing, and then the group came back together and stuff. But I didn't know that Michael Jackson was not the first one to leave the group. But they didn't talk really about the whole situation on why, what was going on. It was more of, because Michael was the glue of the Jackson 5, they stuck with him. Now, there's a lot more to this story that we probably don't know, but they're not telling the whole story, because if you remember, if you watch the movie, I'm going to do this as a spoiler alert. I honestly believe there's going to be a part 2, because you ended the movie at the Victory Tour, and which was around the time Michael Jackson did his Bad album. Around the time between the Bad album and the Thriller album, you did the Victory Tour, and you ended the movie there. Now, you didn't do his whole life story, because remember, you had the Dangerous album, you had the History album, you had, Blood on the Dance Floor, you had a lot of these, Invincible, his last album, which I love and stuff like that. But you have a lot more, so honestly, I believe there is going to be a part 2. Now, with this said, I want to know what y'all actually think about what's been going with this movie. What's y'all review? Because this movie told me a lot. that I needed to know. And a lot of stuff that you've seen the other documentaries, the Jacksons, the American Dream, and the story with the Jackson 5, and you've seen other documentaries, but this movie actually gave me more in depth of Michael Jackson's personal life, and I was like, wow. And I said to myself, there needs to be more. And I also said that there is going to be a part two. There has to be a part two. And I was like, you know what? Something is not being told in this story, because there's always a documentary, and I say this with a lot of documentaries. You never get the full 100% of that. You maybe get 80 to 90% of the story. Just like with the Tina Turner What's Love Got to Do with This story. We probably got about 90 to 95% of the story, but there is a lot that we probably still don't know that maybe was never told. And now that, rest in peace Tina Turner and rest in peace Ike Turner, now that they both are, with the Lord, the only other people that can probably tell you that story is the people that was around it. Anna Mae's family, the background dancers, the other lady who had kids with Ike Turner, previous Ike Turner. Because, we never knew about Ike's previous relationships with a lot of the other people that he dated before he married Tina Turner. We don't know the backup dancers to Ike Turner, and the Ike Turner, the musicians that was in his group. A lot of them didn't come forward and say this was going down. This, because remember, if you watch the movie, Ike had backup dancers. He had a band. And even before he met Tina Turner, he had a band. And none of them, to my knowledge, came up forward and said, hey, I'm going to tell my side of the story of the I can Tina Turner, because a lot of them witnessed a lot of that. You remember in the scene of What's Love Got to Do with It, where they was at the house and the backup dancers was in the pool and they heard Tina screaming. They didn't witness it in the eyes, but they heard it. And, a lot of them was like, this is it. So a lot of them, we don't know a lot of the stuff that we still missing bits and pieces. And I've said the same thing with the Michael movie. There's a lot that is being not told in this movie, and some of the stuff is probably in the vault that would never come out, to where we would never find the truth. But honestly, why didn't we get to see the other brothers being punished? We only got to see Michael being punished in the movie. We all was told as we was growing up that Joe Jackson was beating on all of his kids, but in the movie all you see was Michael getting beaten and punished. So I looked at it as if there's something behind this story that we are not being told. And you didn't include, like I said earlier, you didn't include Rebe Jackson, you didn't include Janet Jackson, even though the movie was basically centered around Michael Jackson because he was the more success story than all of the other Jacksons. But really, and I'm quite sure there's going to be more movies and documentaries come out, because eventually we're going to have a Janet Jackson movie where it's going to be Janet, and then they're going to have somebody like maybe Tiana Taylor or somebody that's going to be playing Janet Jackson. And I'm looking at it as if, I'm waiting for it, because with that movie, of course, you're going to have Michael in it. But there is going to be, I honestly believe there's going to be a part two in this. So let me know what y'all think about the Michael movie. Do you think that the story was told right? Do you think there is going to be there's several questions I want to know. What is your review of the Michael Jackson movie? That's one. Number two, what do you think about them not having Janet and Rebe in the movie? Do you think it was a good thing? Do you think it was a bad thing? Another thing, do you think there's going to be a part two of this movie? Because the way they ended it, of course, I believe there's going to be a part two of this movie. And do you think that they told the story accurately, or do you think that they're missing a lot of key points out of this? Because I feel like there's a lot of stuff that we don't know that is still, because you ended the movie on the note where Michael Jackson cut ties with his father, and now we don't know what his relationship with his father after the Victory Tour. Did he have a strange relationship? Was his relationship, did he have a strange relationship with his father? What was his relationship with everybody? We don't know nothing. So basically, I think there is going to be a part two. But let me know what you feel about the Michael movie. If you didn't go see it yet, please go see it, because it's already been out in the movies for about a month or so. And I don't want you to miss it, because now if you miss this movie, the only way you can catch it is if you go stream it on some app, some streaming app. And like most of us, we don't have streaming apps. So let me know. Also, comment at the bottom of this page. You can also email me, roundtable00@yahoo.com. And I thank y'all for watching this. And this is the host, your host C Money, for the Round Table Talk. Go see the Michael movie if you haven't gone to see it yet. It's still in theaters, and you need to go see it if you haven't seen it, so you can get a more in-depth. Comment at the bottom of this page. Email me, roundtable305@yahoo.com. Thank you for watching. As always, stay blessed, stay safe, stay hydrated, and I'll see you in the next episode. Take care.